And so yeah, as I said, I'm here in Düsseldorf at the Porticus premises, and I would like to give the floor to Barbara von der Mark to say a few welcome words.
Hello everybody and welcome to Düsseldorf, even if it's only virtually. We had the invitation spoken out to have this second webinar recorded and taken here in Düsseldorf, which is the EFID webinar. So on behalf of us, you're invited here or we invite you on behalf of EFID to Düsseldorf. And the issue, as you know, is dementia and migration. And yeah, I think I hand back to you.
Yeah, or if you want to outline the...
yeah, I can outline the agenda
of the webinar.
Yeah. Okay. So after the introduction, you will receive an input from Alzheimer Europe, from Dianne Gove, about the study on people with dementia from minority ethnic groups. Afterwards, we will hear about the experience of Demenz Support Stuttgart and the project DeMigranz, presented by Gabriele Kreutzner and Sümeyra Öztürk. Then we will have Q&A, so you will have room for questions and answers, and afterwards we will come to the conclusions. So enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Barbara. Maybe before we hand it over to the panelists, I would like to briefly introduce the EFID project. And most probably you know EFID already, but for those attendees who don't know the initiative, EFID is a joint initiative of European foundations. It started in 2010-2011, and currently the foundations involved are Robert Bosch Stiftung, the King Baudouin Foundation, the Fondation Médéric Alzheimer, and Porticus. So the current phase of EFID aims to work on valuing the expertise of people living with dementia and with a specific focus on the community. And one of the activities that we are carrying out is a series of webinars. So as Barbara just mentioned, we have had already the first webinar where we spotlighted the Rifugio Re Carlo Alberto, which is one of the EFID organizations, so one of the organizations that EFID supported over the years. And this second webinar addressed an important topic, which is dementia and migration. Timely, I think, very urgent as well, and we will hear more about the relevance also of this topic at European level from Dianne, and also a very tangible example from Germany with Gabriele and Sümeyra. So maybe, yeah, we can really dive into the content and present the panelists. So Dianne, maybe you can start. You have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, sorry. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Dianne Gove, and I'm the Director for Projects at Alzheimer Europe.
Thank you, Dianne. And Sümeyra and Gabriele?
Okay, my name is Sümeyra Öztürk. I'm a social worker, and since the beginning of DeMigranz, working by Demenz Support Stuttgart.
Great.
Okay. I'm Gabriele Kreutzner, and I'm responsible for information and communication at Demenz Support Stuttgart. And yeah, I'm here to sort of support my colleague, Sümeyra Öztürk, in this important task and in presenting DeMigranz.
Okay, thank you. And I will also, well, show you the other members of the EFID partner foundations that are here with me. So you can't see it, but I will actually move my laptop so that you will see all my colleagues. So Birgitte Stahle.
Hello, I'm from the Bosch Foundation. Hello, everybody.
Very short.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Hart. I work for ODS, and I'm part of the co-creation process for the EFID quality framework. Hello, I'm Saida from the Gabriele Foundation. Hello to Diana, Gabriele.
Hi.
Okay, quickly going to the other side. Sorry.
Yeah, we are very much in the shadow.
Yeah, I'm Ann-Kathrin Klus, and I'm working with Barbara Support.
Oh,
Yeah.
behind the shadows, we can, we know you.
Okay, so thank you. And let's get started and dive into the content. Dianne, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see this? No.
No, you have to share your screen.
No. Wait a minute. Shadows.
If it doesn't work, I have the slides, and I
Could you perhaps just put them up because it's just got lost?
Yes, of course.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so in the meantime, maybe you can already start.
Yeah, I'll just so thank you for having invited me to come here today and to give this speech. Alzheimer Europe's work on intercultural care and support involved the exploration of issues, especially challenges, related to the provision of intercultural care and support to people with dementia and their carers from minority ethnic groups in Europe. Can I actually move the slides myself from here?
No, now
okay. Oh, so the next one, please.
Sorry.
Yeah. So interculturalism is essentially about how we interact, understand, and respect each other. It's about ensuring that the cultural diversity of a population is acknowledged and catered for, so that minority ethnic groups are included by design and planning and not as an add-on or afterthought. I'd like to quote from a report by Age Action 2015, which states an intercultural approach recognizes and encourages people's freedom to keep their identities alive, supporting all cultures to flourish together and share their heritage. It sees difference as something positive that can enrich society and recognizes racism as an issue that needs to be tackled in order to create a more inclusive society. So next slide, please. Before going any further, on behalf of Alzheimer Europe, I'd like to gratefully acknowledge the funding and support received under an operating grant from the European Union's Health Programme and also from the Robert Bosch Stiftung for the work carried out in 2018, and the continued funding from the Robert Bosch Stiftung for the work carried out in the period from July this year to the end of December next year. And I'll come back to this again at the end of the presentation. So next slide, please. Do you have the next slide?
Yes, I'm.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in order to carry out this work, we set up an ethics intercultural care working group in which there were people from the majority and minority ethnic groups, including some who've migrated to or within Europe in the last few decades. There are also members of the group who are familiar with some of the main world religions, such as Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Sikhism. And members of the group all have direct contact with people from minority ethnic groups on a regular basis, and they had expertise in specific domains which were of relevance to us for this project. So, for example, in support, service provision, diagnosis, and interpretation. And we also involved a European working group of people with dementia. And this group was set up in 2012 and is comprised of people with dementia who've all been nominated by one of Alzheimer Europe's member associations. And the aim of the working group is to ensure that the voices of people with dementia are represented in all the work carried out by Alzheimer Europe and also in external projects. So the European working group also provided valuable insight into this topic and concrete contacts in their countries, and we further received wider commentary from experts in the Netherlands, Finland, and Sweden. So next slide, please. So there are several reasons why it's important to promote the development of intercultural care and support for people with dementia. Firstly, many people who migrated to Europe in the 1960s and 1980s are reaching an age when the risk of developing dementia is higher. A 7-fold increase in the prevalence of dementia amongst people from minority ethnic groups is predicted in the UK in the next 40 years. Minority ethnic status is not solely a cultural issue in the sense of shared traditions, practices, and values. It's often linked to lower socioeconomic status, discrimination, stigma, language difficulties, and low levels of literacy, without meaning to stereotype. This has been described as a triple whammy of age, ethnicity, and socioeconomic deprivation. Next, please. Other reasons include the fact that people with dementia from some minority ethnic groups are notably absent in residential care, even though many people from minority ethnic groups work in such homes. People from minority ethnic groups tend to use fewer services compared to the majority ethnic groups, and are also notably absent from research, which includes research into care and support. So this means that there's a risk of care, even person-centered care, reflecting the values and needs of the majority because those of the minority are simply not understood. The issue of involvement in research is actually an issue that Alzheimer Europe is addressing in its ethics work this year. It's sometimes assumed that people from minority ethnic groups don't need services and support, and this is based on the assumption that they look after their own, which is a stereotype that needs to be challenged. And the claim that they are difficult or impossible to reach should not be synonymous with easy to avoid. That's the next slide, please. So the outcomes of this project include a report on the identification and promotion of intercultural care and support containing recommendations, and this is available in English, French, and German now. There's also a repository of good practices which can be accessed directly on Alzheimer Europe's website, and I have the link on the last slide. At the moment, it covers 25 different minority groups. It's divided into initiatives either for healthcare professionals or for people with dementia, carers, and the general public. It's recognisable from the title from which country an initiative originates, and it contains materials, video clips, and/or contact details. The identification and sharing of tried and tested initiatives and materials should hopefully provide ideas and a solid basis for the development or improvement of intercultural care services and support in Europe. In most cases, the examples in the database would of course need to be adapted, but sharing ideas and information in this way will help trigger ideas and avoid duplication of efforts. The database is an ongoing repository of information, so we would really be pleased to hear from any of you about other initiatives and materials in Europe, and we'd happily add these to the repository. It has a fairly pragmatic structure. On the cover page, which isn't this one, you just need to skim through the list of terms related to different minority ethnic groups, click on the one that you're interested in, and then you're taken to details of the relevant materials and initiatives in that country or for that language or group. And on this slide, you can see a screenshot of the section on materials in Arabic or which may be of interest to Arabic communities in Europe. The initials in brackets at the end after each title show the country in which the initiative was developed. And there are actually 5 initiatives in this section, but some of them are of relevance to both healthcare professionals and people with dementia, carers, and the general public. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So if we clicked, for example, on Memoni, which is an initiative which was developed in Finland, you'd be taken to the page that you can see here, which provides details about the initiative, and in this particular case contains a series of PDF documents which can be downloaded. There are actually much more details about the actual initiative, but I couldn't fit this all on one slide. And this particular organisation has numerous PDFs in different languages and for different minority groups, and we're due to add another 20 or 30 onto the site. So it's quite encouraging to see that this is constantly developing. Next slide, please. So returning now to the report, it includes 5 main sections. The first section sets the scene by examining the rationale for the work and exploring various relevant concepts. The second looks at how perceptions of dementia and various factors affect whether people seek help when they experience signs and symptoms of possible dementia. The third was on assessment, diagnosis, and treatment, which the working group felt was particularly important because in the sense that the person who's not diagnosed in a timely manner and an accurate manner has little chance of accessing appropriate support and services. And then in the fourth section, we look at issues of relevance to the actual provision of intercultural care and support in relation to food and drink, appearance and dress, a safe environment, and end-of-life care issues, just to name a few. And then the fifth and last section looks at the issues of relevance to people who provide care and support, both professionally and informally, including professional carers who are themselves from minority ethnic groups. Thank you. This slide provides an overview of the key issues addressed in the report. And as I go through the various sections, some of these will be mentioned, but I just wanted to give you an impression of the richness and the complexity of the issues surrounding the provision of intercultural care and support to people with dementia and their carers or supporters. And there were several cross-cutting themes, for example, filial responsibility, the importance of the family, pride, honour, shame, and issues related to language, literacy and education. So we included a lot of cross-referencing in the report also to avoid repetition. Next slide, please. Thank you. Turning now to the first section of the report, which covered key concepts and terminology. I already mentioned interculturalism earlier, but there are a few other key concepts to highlight, such as cultural awareness, which is knowledge about different cultures, different religions, traditions, common beliefs and preferences, history and shared values. Cultural sensitivity, which covers acknowledgement of cultural differences and similarities between people, but without assigning them a value, so without saying they're good or bad, right or wrong. And then cultural competence, knowledge combined with appropriate attitudes and skills, for example, openness, respect, awareness of one's own background, readiness to question one's own assumptions, and ability to communicate with people from different cultures. And we were keen to emphasize that our focus on ethnicity was on ethnicity and not in any way on race. We considered ethnicity as a shared culture, often incorporating a common language, geographic locale or place of origin, religion, sense of history, traditions, values, beliefs, and food habits, but also that these are not homogeneous groups in that there will still be differences between members of a group and similarities with other groups. And the next one, please. Section 2 focused on understanding dementia and help seeking. So we need to understand how people make sense of dementia and different perceptions surrounding the cause of dementia, for example, it being a divine punishment or test, a mental disorder which runs in the family, poor care or neglect, or a natural part of aging, that these beliefs may affect the readiness to seek medical attention and support. And such perceptions are not limited solely to minority ethnic groups, but the issue is that they may be more common among some groups, and this may be combined with a lack of awareness or access to information provided in the context of the healthcare system. There's no word for dementia in some languages. In others, commonly used lay terms reflect an awareness of dementia but often have negative connotations. The fear of stigma and shame, not only on the person concerned but on the whole family, can be a big deterrent from seeking help. Low levels of literacy and of health literacy, language difficulties, and lack of trust are more common in some minority ethnic groups. And standard approaches to raising awareness are often inappropriate. They rely on written information. They're made available in places where people from minority ethnic groups don't go. They contain images which don't reflect their lives and the people they know, and which, even if translated, still require literacy skills. So it's therefore essential to involve people from minority ethnic communities in the development of communication materials and strategies, and to ensure that those developed are accessible and meaningful. So the next one, please. Thank you. The third section is about diagnosis, assessment, and treatment. And certain factors which may be more common amongst people from minority ethnic groups may increase the risk of developing dementia. So, for example, maybe diabetes, vascular disease, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, and depression. But diagnosis of many people from minority ethnic groups remains problematic. Many receive a substandard diagnostic workup and no specification of the type of dementia. GPs may fail to refer people from minority ethnic groups to specialists, and there's also some evidence that people from minority ethnic groups are not being equally prescribed medication. People from minority ethnic groups may experience the same kinds of symptoms, but describe them differently or have difficulty explaining them in the dominant language. And there's a lack of culturally sensitive assessment and diagnostic tools. And translation isn't enough, and interpretation can be problematic, with a lack of availability, poor understanding of the role of interpreters sometimes affecting the actual results of tests, and the use of relatives also raising problems in terms, although very welcome, but in terms of accuracy of translation, privacy, and confidentiality issues. Fortunately, there are several tools that have recently or are currently being developed. Sorry, the next one. Thank you. The fourth section focuses on support and care and emphasises the importance of person-centred care in the context of relationships and communities. According to the 2010 guidelines from the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare, this should involve consideration of the cultural and linguistic needs of the person and his or her entourage. For example, having the opportunity to practice religion, have culturally appropriate food, maintain cultural traditions and customs, and have access to nursing staff who can communicate in the same native language. And we looked at a few studies and examples of mainstream versus separate or specialised services, and we noted some different preferences and expectations for each, but concluded that person-centred care was also possible in mainstream care. Challenges to the provision of intercultural care and support include, for example, lack of trust in the healthcare system, inappropriate services, stigma, financial issues, filial piety, religious duty, and gender roles, including discrepancies between the named as opposed to the actual carers. And throughout the report, we were keen to emphasise that culture is just one aspect of a person's identity and shouldn't overshadow their individuality. As Mohammed Akhlaq Rauf, a member of the working group, stated, it's important that people are respected as individuals and individual families rather than seen as generalised conceptions of stereotypical groups. So awareness and acceptance of cultural differences can provide a solid basis from which to explore and understand the needs and wishes of each person in his or her own right as an individual. Next one, please. The last section looks at issues of importance to professional and informal carers. So information was notably lacking about the needs and experience of carers from minority ethnic groups who don't actually have a direct experience of migration. Second or third generation descendants also may sometimes feel caught between their understanding of the two opposing traditions. And issues affecting many migrant carers included stereotyping, often bordering on racism, different values and cultural perceptions, both of dementia and of formal care, carers having their own care responsibilities in another country for a dependent relative, for example, discrimination and prejudice. Some carers experience cultural and ethnic matching as a limitation to their career advancement. And we also explored some of the issues of relevance to live-in carers, which represents a largely unregulated and potentially vulnerable group. When people migrate to a new country, there's usually a period of adaptation and getting accustomed to a different way of life, and sometimes to different customs and values. And in this context, the concept of acculturation is important, which is defined as the occurrence of change when individuals from different cultural backgrounds come into prolonged, continuous, first-hand contact with each other. It's important to realise that this is a two-way process, but also that individuals and groups may experience acculturation differently and at different paces. So approaches to intercultural care and support need to be flexible and dynamic. Next one, please. So what next? Well, with the continued funding from the Robert Bosch Stiftung, Alzheimer Europe will be able to continue to promote the development of intercultural care and support for people with dementia and their carers as a means to respond to the increasing numbers of people from minority ethnic groups in Europe who have dementia or may develop it in the coming years. So we'll be able to develop shorter documents targeted at healthcare professionals and decision makers who may be dedicated to making changes but don't always have the time to read through lengthy, complex reports. We'll be publishing an article in a peer-reviewed journal so as to reach a wider audience. and we'll be developing a more sophisticated database of intercultural care initiatives. And so I'd like to express my gratitude again to the Robert Bosch Stiftung for making this possible, and also to Brigitte Stehler for accompanying and supporting us along the way. Thanks to EFID as well. And on the next slide, I'd like to show you the members of the working. So I'd like to thank everybody here for their attention, and thank you to the experts who made this work possible. At the bottom of the screen, you can see where you can freely download the reports in French, German, or English. And the database, that's what we sometimes call the repository, that's where you can see the examples of the different initiatives. And as I said earlier, would be really, really pleased to hear from any other initiatives. It doesn't matter how large or small they are. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dianne. That was extremely interesting and very comprehensive. So I invite all those who are interested to download the report and have a look at it, because it really gives interesting insight into the topic. And so the idea is to have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but maybe we can take one or two questions now for you, Dianne, and then move on to Gabriele and Sümeyra. So I can use all the participants to this webinar. Feel free to type your question. Again, you have the button at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the chat if you wish to chat with the panelists. So there is one question at the moment, and well, two questions from Saida. She would like to know if Alzheimer Europe has an overview of tools about migrant people who are losing their linguistic competencies and falling back to their original languages. Of course, this makes things more difficult, and especially if they live in a care home context. This is particularly true for the Turkish or Arabic communities.
So the question was whether we actually have detailed information about the different, throughout Europe, you mean? Because no, we actually don't.
Yeah. Sorry, the question was to have, if you have an overview of tools that are addressing migrant people who are losing their linguistic competencies, actually. So
no,
their original language.
No, unfortunately, we don't. We are aware of this phenomenon, but we don't actually have details of different tools that are available. So that would be actually something that could be very interesting to, if other members of the audience did have that, to actually include that on our repository.
Okay, and then I'm seeing that there are more questions arriving on the chat and on the question and answer panel. Do you have access to question and answer?
Yes, just a second.
Okay, so you see, you can type your answer directly, because these are directed to you. So there is one about collaboration with experts from the country of origin. If you have looked at stigma from the perspective of family, that comes from Chariklia Tsiraki. Molly asks about interpretation resources. So maybe now we can move to Gabriele and Sümeyra's presentation, but in the meantime, Dianne, I kindly ask you to type.
Okay, yeah.
If possible. Thank you. And there is also one question in the chat. Laura, hello Laura, she's asking if she's asking what's your understanding of migrant individuals using technology to remain involved socially.
Okay.
A conference like Zoom to facilitate family care and social interaction.
Okay, so I'll go to the questions and answers.
Thank you. And in the meantime, Gabriele and Sümeyra, the floor is yours to present the Demenz Support Stuttgart and the DeMigranz project. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. So let's get started.
Okay. Yes, let me start by thanking Dianne. I think the study she presented is very good for setting the basis for intercultural work in the field of dementia. And I think it speaks very much to the situation across the countries, if to varying degrees, of course. It also has the advantage of being a very recent study, even though in many countries, work has been going on for quite a while, for at least 20 years or so. So the situation or the problem is well known in a whole variety of countries, I would say. And this gives me the opportunity to switch to our topic, which is not description or analysis, only to a minor degree, but about the question of how to act, how to get into action, how to change the situation. And I'd like to give you a little bit of background of the project at DeMigranz, which actually starts in the year 2015, when the major players, as I would call them, in Germany in the fields of dementia care and work with the elderly came together and talked about the issue of dementia and migration. And there was the consensus that even though a lot of things had been done, it was not enough, and it was time to act, to get to action, and to get things going in a more, concise way. And then the question was what to do. And at that point, once again, Robert Bosch Foundation was willing to step in and was willing to provide some funding for a temporary project or initiative to get things started. So that was the idea behind DeMigranz, or an initiative to get things going. And then the question was, well, how are we going to do it? And there was a call out for suggestions, approaches, what would be the best way to proceed. And that's where we as Demenz Support got in and threw our ideas into, on the table. People convened, and there was an intense discussion about how to proceed, what to do. And that, I think, that was the beginning of the initiative that now is called DeMigranz. It's a neologism, obviously, going back to dementia and migration, the two words taken together. And DeMigranz is a project coordinated by Demenz Support Stuttgart, but carried out, or the idea is that it's carried out by a lot of initiatives, groups, players, stakeholders across the country. And the very core idea is that we can't really get into action and to improve things if we have like one solution for all. We have to see that situations are very diverse, and that we should start from the federal level and to look at, what is there, where are the resources, where are the problems, and to get players together in these different contexts, in these different federal contexts. Yeah, I'll move there. This is a picture about, the numbers of people with a migration background in Germany, which I have to add the overall numbers. We are talking about a population of 82.4 million people in Germany, with 18.6 million people with a migration background. We have a total of 1.8 million people over 65 and about 96,500 people with dementia. These are numbers taken from a study by our colleagues at the DZNE in Greifswald. And I have tried to show you, or to work it up so that you can see the big differences in Germany. The little splits over there are the new federal states, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Saxon, etc., which make up only very, very small portion of the overall situation. And obviously you have a big difference between East and West, but you also have a big difference between, like, the three largest states in Germany take up about 60% of all people with dementia living there. Then you have the rest in the older federal states, and then you have the tiny portion. So you have like a difference in terms of old federal states versus new federal states, of country and city, of traditions in East and West, of different traditions between the federal states, etc. So the decision was to start, at the level of the federal states and to get stakeholders there together and try to commit them to work together to improve the situation. That's the basic idea behind DeMigranz. And here I'm going to hand over to Sümeyra.
So now, hello together. Now we heard why DeMigranz started. DeMigranz is a project that will take 5 years, and quite the hub is gone at the moment. So just a bit more information. DeMigranz, we told you that it is funded by the Robert Bosch Stiftung, and there are also a professional support involved, which are on this slide. So I won't explain them more to not to spend so much time. Dianne told you about the hurdles and access barriers of people with migration background. So you can read it in the Dementia and Minority Ethnic Groups in the report. So let's go on. What is DeMigranz and what wants DeMigranz? DeMigranz, the main goals are that people with dementia and their families, that people with dementia, migrational background, and their families get an easier access to the specialized services. The specialized services, Dianne told you, are services in their language, in their native language, so they can tell their problems a bit easier. We try to develop counseling and information systems and services, and that they are culturally sensitive services, maybe in the native language, trying to make the whole population with or without migration background aware of this issue. Improving a nationwide network in Germany, a network and the structure that all players which are involved or interested in the issue can share experiences, concepts, or materials. So we call it good to copy projects or materials. So no one has to start from the scratch. Also, of course, at the end, improving the quality of life for people with dementia and having a migrational background, because in different cultures maybe there's not an appreciation of dementia, and improving information for families on the topic of dementia is also important, so they know what to do. What happened in DeMigranz till today? So we first in Germany we figured out the relevant players which are active or interested in the issue, and people with migrational background, and organized an event to present the project at first, and offer the opportunity to the players to meet each other and to exchange their experiences, their knowledge, or their offers and ideas, or their requirements. The special thing was also that we invited representatives of migrant organizations, because these people are the professionals in this issue. They know about the needs, about what is important for this communities. We gathered the demographic data. Gabriele told you that. We tried to create an overview about what is available or what is available in Germany, and identify the special services which are created, and try to use the available resources in the federal states and include cooperation partners and involve also, of course, for important migrant organizations. We, I have to say that Germany is a bit big. We have 16 federal states, and in every federal state, the structure is really, really different. So we don't have a master plan to go out and say, okay, this is the master plan, and if we do it like that, it will go to a happy end. That doesn't work. So in every federal state, we have to start at the first step and look what is the situation there. Till now, we have cooperations with the federal states Baden-Württemberg, Bayern, Hamburg, Sachsen, and Schleswig-Holstein. And now we're in communication. Thank you. In communication with Berlin and Hessen and Bremen, so they will join us in the next month, I hope so. So, what about the process? How are we trying to realize, make DeMigranz work? At the first step, we identify the active actors or some who wants to be active under this issue, and then make a first exploratory talk. So in this talk, they're involved the cooperation partner, the ministries or migrant organizations. We always have to identify these actors in every federal state for ourselves. We create working groups and try to, we create these working groups, improve platforms for the exchange in this federal state. So we, so DeMigranz has the goal to be a founding member of the federal initiatives. So we're improving platforms for exchange for all the actors or them who wants to be active under this issue. And DeMigranz just undertakes and moderates the process and supports then the nationwide network in the federal states and in Germany. I have an example for you. It's Hamburg. Hamburg is a really good example for how DeMigranz works. We found in Hamburg the Office for Coordination Live with Dementia in Hamburg. First, we had exploratory talks with them. The participants were important players. So at the left side, you see some members of them are migrant organizations, active relatives of people with dementia and migrational background, institutions, ministry and communities. So then we made a cooperative agreement with these cooperation partners. After that, we tried to make a wide-ranging invitations of players in Hamburg, and made some workshops to identify the main issues. Main issues were in Hamburg, where public relation works develop. They developed an organization for Turkish people. On 20 September, it will realize next week. They want to create a manifesto, a signal to the other working groups in Hamburg, because there are many. There are working group Dementia and Hospital, Dementia and Culture, and these working group, which started with the help of DeMigranz, wants to write a manifesto which includes all the people with dementia and migrational background, all the cultures which need support under this issue, and want to tell the others this is a issue which is really important. It not has to deal with segregative.
No, it's inclusive. They want to make it inclusive.
That this working group is an inclusive working group, so we also have to put all the working groups in Hamburg then together. Mm-hmm. So we have a federal state network in Hamburg. So, and at the end of DeMigranz, like the nationwide network, we hope that players are found who continue the work on this issue, like in politics or institutions or migrant organizations. We also hope that they are interconnected to have exchanges, and a network of different players is created for this exchange of experiences and ideas. Because we know there are some resources, but they aren't enough, and we need more. So they have to create some ideas and realize them in the future, because the issue will never end.
Hopefully it will.
The issue, dementia and migration background, will never end. We always have a first generation, and I think we have our way is long.
That's for sure.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there are some questions. Maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gabriele and Sümeyra. That was really interesting, and I'm seeing also many questions popping up. So I would like to maybe pick up some of the questions, and we can answer live now. We still have 10 minutes for question and answers, and then I kindly ask you to address all the other questions separately, and maybe we can also share your contact details so that people can just email you in case they want more information. For instance, I see here someone asking the contact person from Hamburg. So if you could share the contact person from Hamburg. And I see Molly asks if there have been kind of players who were difficult to involve in the working groups, ethnic groups or kind of organizations, and how are you working to overcome these challenges or these difficulties? And there is also one question, Dianne, still for you in the chat. Don't forget, it's from Laura, and it's about migrant individuals using technology.
Yeah.
So maybe Sümeyra, could you maybe answer this question live from Molly and address the others separately? So some difficult players.
Molly asked, have there been kinds of players difficult to involve in the working groups? I think groups, how are you working to overcome this? Thank you. Of course, we are humans. So here and there are some difficult players, but we try to tell them that, especially now, the elderly generation, which were the first generation of guest workers in Germany, need a specialized service, because for them there was never a topic like integration. Maybe this is a topic which is often repeated. Why didn't they learn German? So why do we have to need specialized services in the native language? And this is maybe a question which always comes with difficult players. But I think we handle it. We just explain and talk and try to look to the issue with the historical background.
Yep. I think that the problem is that there are many difficult players, or maybe we shouldn't call them that, but there are many difficulties on many levels. And what Sümeyra just mentioned is the problem to reach the people that are really concerned, people with dementia, with a migration background. And she mentioned that, you know, that our first so-called guest workers came here and they didn't have the intentions to stay. They themselves didn't have the intention. And the German state, the Western German state, you know, invited them for a certain time. But things happened differently and they stayed. And we have the problem that many of them don't speak the language. So there is a major difficulty which cannot be solved from one day to the next. You can try via migrant organizations, different migrant organizations, and to try to get them involved. This is a process that has been going on before DeMigranz, and it will continue because there are difficulties to get together because of language and culture and whatever barriers. And you have to take one step after the other. Other difficulties, you know, is like interest. I mean, we call, or Peter Wissmann, our colleague, has called DeMigranz, on one level, DeMigranz is a meta project. You know, it's trying to talk to all of the stakeholders and who can, you know, contribute to change on various levels, on the political level, on the level of civil society, on the level of the care networks and care systems, and get them, you know, to talk together and to work together, you know, pick up their share of responsibility. And some will respond, and we have to work with whoever is willing to respond, and the rest, you know, we hope the rest will follow.
Thank you, Gabriele and Sümeyra. Thanks.
I hope I could answer the difficult players. So,
yes. Yes.
I also have to say, in Germany, no ministry said we aren't interested. Everyone said we are interested. It's a really important topic. So it was not that hard to go on with DeMigranz.
And I see also in a comment an interesting perspective. The other side, I would say, Pedro Macedo asks, what about inclusive and participative solutions that we, meaning I guess as hosting countries, let's say, can learn from the immigrant communities? That could, of course, be also an interesting debate. I don't know if someone of you wants to share her thoughts on this. Dianne, Gabriele, Sümeyra. Do you have any experience, maybe even examples, concrete examples of circumstances where you learned something from this, from the immigrant community, new approach, maybe new tools?
Yeah. There was one thing which was really important for us during the DeMigranz time till now was the migrant groups feel like they are forgotten. So no one was interested in them. Now I just say it with in parentheses that the Germans are now coming and saying, oh, we see that you have a problem, so we will make a solution for it, and we will find a solution for it. And they say, sorry guys, is anyone asking us what we need? So this is, this talk, this dialogue is really, really important to create something which is also, which you can make, put in the structure, in the health and care structure and system in Germany, and also is for the needs of these people, of these groups. So you always have to put both together.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Dianne, do you want to comment on this, or do you have any remark maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just one thing is that personally myself, from having worked on this project for the last year, the thing that has really struck me is kind of like the need to understand culture, but at the same time not to lose sight of the individual, and that sometimes with trying to, sometimes there's a tendency maybe to not overcompensate, but to try so hard to understand the differences in the cultural sensitivities and awareness, that there's a tendency to again group people and to stereotype them, and to actually fail to see the individuality of the person and the differences between and within different cultural minority groups.
Thank you. Maybe this also, this comment is relevant to the questions. The question by participants who asked if there is any recommendation for member states to work on the aging group with different backgrounds, and how to succeed to integrate this expertise on culture-sensitive services and attitudes like DeMigranz, for instance.
Yeah.
Sümeyra, Gabriele, and Dianne, there are more questions queuing.
Yeah, I don't know which one to pick.
If you want to
Okay.
type your answer,
Oh, yeah.
maybe there was also a question on, I think, on policy makers. On the German preparing a dementia plan. I think maybe.
I think I've been answering some of these.
Yes, maybe we have Birgit Stahle from Robert Bosch Stiftung who wish to answer this, and I give her the floor.
Okay. So,
Just a short answer, as the Robert Bosch Stiftung is a member of one of the four working groups. We addressed the topic dementia and migration in the whole process, and I myself are in the working group, and I hope that the topic is included and is then funded and taken care of.
That's another thing.
Thank you, Birgitte. So I think it's 3. With perfect timing, I would say. There are still some questions that are open. But please also, maybe I will send a follow-up email to all the attendees, also with the contact details of Gabriele, Sümeyra, and Dianne, so that further questions could be asked. Just maybe to conclude, I would like to hear some final remarks from the panelists, and then I'll give the floor to EFID members to close the webinar. So, Sümeyra and Gabriele, some final remarks on the topic and on something that you would like to share. And maybe, maybe even an answer of one of the questions, how to integrate your knowledge in a broader network on European level.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's actually a wish I have, that we'll be capable to do that. And I think EFID is a very good example, or a very good way, one way, to work further, maybe to report on what's been going on in DeMigranz at some later point, and maybe also, get some communication going with people in other countries who've been doing that kind of work, and share good practice, as Dianne has suggested with her work and the platform of Alzheimer Europe. So we should integrate this, all of these things into a larger communication about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Dianne or Sümeyra, you want first?
I just try to answer a question. So I think I still said this is an issue which will never end. And if we can make now the system fitting to all the needs for the future, so just when I'm older and maybe getting a dementia, hope it will everything be good.
Yeah. Thank you. Dianne?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that I think there's a lot of very good work being done at the moment. We need to make sure that this reaches the right people, that the right people hear about it, those who can actually take action, and they need to be motivated to take action. And I hope that that's what our work together will be doing. And I think from the point of view of Alzheimer Europe, we'll be trying to put this issue forward and put it on the political agenda more and more. And in all the research projects that we're involved in, it's also an issue that we will be developing further. And also, again, thanks to the Robert Bosch Stiftung, we will be working on this continued over the next year and a half, and in collaboration with other funded projects. So I think it's a huge topic, and I think it's really important.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, so we also hope that the debate keeps going, and also as EFID will we try to work more on the topic, and for sure we will collect all the other questions and send them to the panelists so that they can answer later on. Unfortunately, I think we reached the end of the webinar. 1 hour, it's always goes very fast. So I would like to give the floor to Barbara again from Porticus to close the webinar. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you too.
Yes, also from my side, great presentations. Many thanks. It was really very interesting input. And also thank you for all participants for the lively discussion that we have seen going on in the background. And I hope that all your questions will be answered. And I think this is the first start of a very lively discussion that should be continued. Also lively beyond the EFID activities. So please get in touch with each other and continue the discussion. It was really great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Ach, Rosine war auch da.